Welcome to the April 2023 LAPPG online meeting. We're so glad to have you joining us. I'm thrilled that we're going to be having Kevin Ross back with us again, and he's bringing Daniel Williams. And together we're going to talk about making the leap from AE to editor on Showtime's Yellowjackets. Kevin spent the entirety of his 30-plus year film career in editorial, from his first paid job as a second assistant editor on the non-union feature Kickboxer 2 to his most recent work on Yellowjackets season 2. He has amassed more than 160 episodes of TV and 10 features to his editor resume. Kevin has been nominated twice for Emmys and Eddie Editing Awards. Welcome, Kevin. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us again.
Sure.
And thank you for bringing your friend, Daniel. So I'll introduce Daniel really quick. Daniel Williams was born and grew up in Maryland, where he went to Towson. Is it Towson?
Towson, yeah. Towson University.
Oh, okay. And graduated with a bachelor's in electronic media and film. He then worked for the Discovery Channel's in-house production company as an assistant editor for 2 years in Silver Spring, Maryland. And in 2014, moved to LA, where he worked 3 years in reality television before making it into scripted content in 2017. So welcome to both of you.
I don't know if all of you have seen Yellowjackets or know what it is, but we're in our second season now on Showtime. And it's been a cult hit for Showtime that we were, when we started on it, we had no idea it was going to do that type of, get that type of press and excitement from people. But it worked out and we're happy. But regardless, we have a great team in the post-production department. I mean, everyone, we all get along. We all like each other a lot, even though we're work from home. We would like to be in person so we could interact more, but that's what Slack's for, I guess. And our showrunners are three of the best people ever. And that's what really makes it exciting to work for them, because they're so caring and so nice. Wouldn't you agree, Danny?
Yeah, and they're very open to ideas, which is nice. We've been in a lot of rooms where, some people are a little bit less open to ideas from everyone in the room. And the best thing about Jonathan, Ashley, and Bart is that whatever works is what works. And it doesn't matter whatever you go into it with. Whatever the script said doesn't matter once it's shot and in the edit room.
Ty Geist is our post-producer. Neil Ladorty is our AP. Bethany is our post-super. And the other editors that we work with, Jeff Israel, Kendra Mara. And this year, Jeff's assistant, Jenna Butler, has been bumped up to co-editor on one of the episodes as well. So she's getting to edit also, which is great. Lynn Whitlock is our VFX editor, and she does an amazing job. And then we have our A's, Shane, Whitfield, Elise, and Tucker. So we're just a happy group. And the way that Yellowjackets has worked is it's a 13-day shoot. So we've gotten a little bit better than the network 7 or 8 days. We get 13 days. And then we have the 4 days for editor's cut, generally. And then the schedule shifts. Sometimes it's press, sometimes it expands for the director's cut and the producer's cut, studio cut, network cut. But overall, that's the way we work. And it hasn't been a rush season at all. It's been... It took six months to do 9 episodes. We're still mixing a couple. We have the last 2 episodes that'll mix next week and a couple of weeks from now. But picture editing basically took about 6 months.
Yeah.
So that's all how that's been going. We can't give you spoilers, but I would say that if you haven't watch on Friday when it gets released on Paramount Plus, because it's Danny's first episode.
Yeah, so my first episode airs on Friday. There might be some minor spoilers as we talk about some stuff for season 1, but I at least won't bring up anything for season 2, given that we're only, going to be on episode 4 come Friday.
That's right. And we would love to, because I'd love to tell you about something exciting I was able to cut and I was very proud of in episode 5, but unfortunately not allowed to.
After next week, you can talk about that.
Yeah, exactly. So that's really how Yellowjackets works. But more importantly, I guess, Danny, we should talk about your journey from assistant editing to editing.
Yeah, so like I said, I went to Towson, got an internship at Discovery, worked there for a while, and jumped over to Reality. I understand there's a couple Reality assistants on the call now. And I got first into Reality and then into Union Reality, which was also quite a big shift. But then getting to scripted was just a bit of luck. A post producer I'd worked with for a while on several shows got into a company that was doing a scripted show. So a reality company doing a scripted show. And he just wanted somebody he knew and trusted. So he pulled me along. And from there, I kind of jumped on 2 scripted shows and met Kevin on X-Files. Kevin was a separate editor. I wasn't working for him, but I met him during that time. And then after X-Files, we linked up and started on Sacred Lies, where Kevin's been the best, quite honestly. It's as far as the progression of assisting, I do give him quite a bit of credit, specifically when it came to cutting and stuff. So we can get into a little bit of what the responsibilities were, like what I was doing with footage and stuff.
Oh yeah,
we should do that first, I suppose. Yeah. So just with, coming into working with Kevin was a little bit different than some other editors, because every editor will organize their footage differently. Kevin and myself now as well, big users of ScriptSync. So, syncing the dailies footage to a digital version of the script, which is easy to modify. And then there's like a color coding system to indicate preferred takes, uncircled takes, visual effects, off speed, that kind of thing. And so that would primarily be the first thing I would do during the dailies process, is get in the morning, open up, get all the footage online, bringing the MXF media over from the dailies house, making sure media databases were linked up, and then syncing to the script. Each scene, as I finished the scene, I would throw it over to Kevin, let him know it was done, and I would just go through all of the dailies. And when our first show, Sacred Lies, I was very slow at that. And luckily, Kevin showed me a much faster way to do it, because I had never really done it before on a full show scale. But in general, it got to the point fairly quickly, I think, where I would be done with dailies by around 2 or 3 o'clock. And then after that, and after dailies in general, the assistant would then mostly be doing sound design, and then occasionally, eventually, Kevin would give me scenes to cut.
Yeah, and we were on Avid Media Composer, in case anyone was wondering. And the way Danny does it, he scripts all the takes, all the uncircled takes. We color them yellow, but we have them there. That way I can go through and watch all of the material, even the uncircled takes, when I'm getting ready to cut a scene. So I know all the footage I have. But what I like about the scripter program itself is that I have it available to me so that I can jump to other takes really quickly and find the actual line read, because Danny's marking every line read. We don't use the automated ScriptSync. We do it. Right. Danny does it manually.
And that's because the automated version it gets really messy, and it does like every single line. And Kevin's preference and mine as well is more like natural breaks. As you do the daily, in general, actors tend to be fairly consistent, hopefully, and you find the natural breaks to add another mark. So it might be 3 or 4 sentences or lines, but then they might take a breath or pause or whatever, and then you put an additional mark. And that tends to be a lot cleaner as you're looking quickly while you're working with directors, producers, whomever, to use alternate takes instead of seeing a wall of marks. It's just 1 or 2 marks per block of text, and so that works out pretty well. In fact, I use it so much that I think on Yellowjackets this season, Kevin, I don't know that I told you this, I think I only opened a bin twice. I enjoy using the script so much that I use it for all types of footage and scenes, that I think I only opened bins to look at drone footage for this season. I never, anything that was scene related or scene specific was in the script, and I didn't even need to go into the bin.
That's great. Cool. So that's how we work on Yellowjackets. I don't know how specific we need to get on that itself. But I will tell you that as far as making the jump from AE to editor, and also I'm old school, I like to call it assistant editor. It's still, the shorthand of AE still gets me sometimes, but that's because I'm older.
I tend to say assistant as well.
Yeah. But what I found is with Danny, when we started working together, it was quite one of the advice I would give you if you're an assistant who wants to become an editor or work in reality or find an editor who you want to work with. You just have to be bold and make that jump and that leap and try, because we had worked together on X-Files, but he was with another editor down the hall and I was with an assistant, but my assistant I knew was leaving to go back to another show. So I didn't have anyone, and Danny heard that I was looking for an assistant editor. And so he cold called me out of the blue and said, "Hey, I heard you need an assistant. I want to be your assistant. Why don't we go have lunch and talk about it?" And I was like, "Okay, cool." And so we met, and, I just really appreciated Danny having that desire to want to work with me. And so hired him and told him what I needed. And he was agreeable, because the scripter can get to be a little daunting sometimes. And we went from there. And as we started working, Danny had mentioned he wanted to cut, which, he wasn't afraid to say that. And so that's when I started saying, "Okay, well, let's get you some scenes." And, and he started cutting. Now, on the first block, he didn't do any cutting on the first episodes. But the second set of episodes on that first show, that's when I started letting him cut.
Yeah, and that was what I consider, when I often tell people about working for Kevin, what I think is quite invaluable, is when I did start cutting scenes and it was time for the director and producers to come in. I remember it vividly because it was the first time in years that I had been nervous on a job. He told me before, and he's like, "Hey, when your scene comes up, I'm going to make sure it's okay with the director and producer, but I'm going to see if you come up and run the Avid and you do the notes as we work through the scene." And oh boy, was that a little nerve-wracking for the first time, suddenly being in charge of the Avid, and okay, well, if you're going to do the job, do the job. Yeah. And then luckily it went well. But that kind of experience and getting used to that as we worked together and as I cut scenes, and more, not only did I get more comfortable at the Avid, but also I think it really helped, especially on Yellowjackets season 1, as far as building a relationship with the directors and producers as an editor. So not only does Kevin see what I'm doing and what I'm capable of, and as I'm growing, but now the directors and producers are seeing that work and seeing me work through difficult problems on difficult scenes, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that is really the linchpin of how I ended up getting the bump up to the chair on season 2, was having that FaceTime with the producers in front of the Avid on season 1. Yeah. And when we were still in person, I could just say, "All right, I'm going to sit back, Danny, take over." And he would have to step up to the Avid and work. But when we worked from home, what I always made a point of doing, and by the way, we would do Pack Post Live was our main system. It's like Evercast, Pack Post Live. But we would work through that. And so when I had the producers or the director during the director's cut, I would say, "By the way, this is Danny's scene. So Danny's going to take over." And then he would log into my Avid and take over the Pack Post Live. And it was much easier. Oh, sorry. Yeah. It was much easier when we were in person. Obviously, I could just stand up and go change the settings and work. What I would recommend anybody working via Jump remotely is to make sure that the vendors set up your Jump to have access to your editor's Avid. I think it's useful outside of the editing scope as well, just to be able to have multiple computers for exports, turnovers, etc. But it made it very simple because it was already set up that when it was a scene that I had cut, I just very easily closed down my Avid's Jump and opened up Kevin's, and I could just pick up right there. So it was as seamless as it can get, not being inside the room. Yeah. And I think that's the best way for any assistant to learn, is to actually have the scenes and then to work with the people that are getting them the notes. I know some editors may, not even mention that the assistant cut it for fear that, if the director doesn't like it, they have to cover for them. And so I don't ascribe to that. I feel like
the best way is to learn to do it. Because back when I was an assistant, one of my early editors in non-union films, Alan Baumgarten, he got me bumped up to associate editor on an early movie because we had so much footage, and we brought in an 8-plate Kim from myself to cut in another room, and I got to cut scenes, and then the director and the producer would come in and work with me over my shoulder making changes. And I thought that was, invaluable. Instead of Alan having to take my scenes back over and trying to hunt for footage, I already knew the footage. So, it's one of those. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, and just to be, just so everyone understands, it's not like Kevin gave me a scene, I cut it in a dark room and then presented to the director. Luckily there were several rounds of notes just between Kevin and I, where I would cut the scene, I'd show it to him. Hey, what do you think about this? How's this going? And then he would give me notes that I would then go and execute and bring back, and we would look at it again, which, also started getting me used to the kinds of notes you get. And eventually, I'd say over, we worked together, assistant editor relationship for 4.5 years.
Yeah.
So, it got to the point, once I started to really, what made me feel personally like I was ready for the move up was when the notes that Kevin would give me were the notes I already knew, where it was things like tightening and things I'm like, yeah. Like, of course we're going to tighten it. Yeah. It's a little bit long. This is the first pass. And when they stopped being, oh, a reaction would be good here, or, okay, maybe is there another take? And when they started to be reflective of the things that I wanted out of the scene as well, it was a little bit bolstering as far as like my own self-confidence in the edit room. And then obviously with the directors and producers.
And you had times when you had to totally restructure a scene, like the one in season 1 that you were talking about, Ty's speech.
Yeah.
Just because they come at it a different way and they decide, let's try it a different way. So the ability to undo the entire thing and redo it as in a different style, I think really helped also show that you were fast at what you could do.
Yeah, that and also as scene selection, as far as the scenes that you would allow me to edit, it wasn't just like the simple scenes of two people sitting down at a table. Some of the scenes were more dynamic, and some of them ended up becoming difficult scenes. Specifically, earlier we were talking about an episode from season 1 or episode 5. There's a scene that changed structurally completely because certain aspects of it weren't working, and because that was my scene from the beginning. When I was working with the producers, that was probably what, Kevin, maybe 3 days worth of editing, where we were going back and forth on that scene, trying different things. Some things we would do right away. Other things were like, okay, I need to take this back and we'll look at it again later. And just that balance of working with Ashley, Bart, and Jonathan, I think it's scenes like that from season 1 that gave them the confidence to then boost me up to editor in season 2, because they knew I was capable of dealing with, tough scenes.
Yeah. And a lot of television editing is making good choices, but also the speed at which you make the changes and your willingness to make the changes. I think that's important, because if you try to be standoffish or say, no, that's terrible, I'm not going to do it, you're not going to work very long, or you're going to have trouble staying with people that you're networking with, which I think is also important. But Danny's learned my most important rule of editing, which is
blinks.
Don't cut on a blink.
Don't cut on a blink.
So just can't stand that. That's my one pet peeve, that just can't cut on blinks. But as far as assisting, for my assistants that I've had before Danny, I also had assistants that actually were editors. But the hardest part, I think, about jumping from assistant to editor is finding the next job. Like, what is the next job after that first big break that you have? For me, I got lucky. I had cut a couple low budget features while I was assisting, and I kept thinking, oh, that's going to be my big break. That's going to come out and be the next American Pie or whatever. But it went direct to DVD. But when my editor, the same editor, Alan Baumgarten, that I mentioned before, when he was cutting a pilot, he called me up and I said, Alan, I really don't want to do it. I'm trying to be an editor now. He said, well, I'll let them know you're an editor. And so I came back and assisted. Day 1 in the cutting room with the producers and the director, he said, this is Kevin. He's an editor, but he's helping me out on this pilot. And so already in their head, they knew that I was an editor. And he put that in their mind so that when if the show got picked up, they would think of me for one of the chairs. And it did. And it worked out really well.
Not only is it, I think the speed and like willingness to change your edits, because that I think that is a really big one, is knowing how to deal with criticism and constructive criticism. And honestly, I think that's also one where being in the room with Kevin was so valuable for so long, and just getting to witness how he would respond to notes that we may or may not have agreed with, and different styles of directors and producers. We've worked with some who want to go through every single take and look at every single line for every single take. Sometimes we settle on the one that we already had. Sometimes it's one that's like marginally different, and then sometimes it's a whole new direction. But just getting to see, Kevin and his, in all of his greatness, deal with all of the, all the different personalities and different types of notes and environments, and then, letting that train me a bit on how to then deal with that when I come into the same circumstance.
Well, I will say that I have made plenty of mistakes in that world before, where when I was young and stupid, I did do pushback, and then they're like, "What's your problem?" I'm like, "Okay, cool." You have to realize it's easy to change, and it's so easy to do nonlinear versus when we were on film, you'd have to undo the splices and put them back and make changes that way. I don't see there's no reason why not to try something anymore. When you edit, you can, yours is the best version, but you can still try other people's versions. So,
and there are times where, as much as, at least, especially on season 2, where, I was really happy with an edit and a different idea came in. And then, 2 hours later, I'm like, okay, it was a pretty good note. It's better, whether it's faster or just different, whatever it was. So sometimes you do have to see it and just get different perspectives and ideas. So you can't hold on too tightly to your own.
Yeah. So I've tried to give that information to Danny as we've worked. So, it has helped, I think.
I think it's helped quite a bit, yeah.
But I will say that whenever I've had, like, as I said, my assistants who have edited in the past, I try to remind the producers, their editors, and I want them to always think that way, because when I was starting out and I got to be a really, really good assistant editor myself in features, I couldn't get a bump up to save my life because everyone valued me as an assistant. They didn't want to, on the union shows, they wanted to keep me as their first or whatever. So that made it a little difficult. And so if that's what you want to do, talk to your editor as an assistant and just say, "I'd really like to cut some scenes if that's all right with you." I think that's, hopefully your editor is open to that. And not too precious with it, because they can always change it if they need to. But I think that's the best experience possible, the way it works now, with only like one assistant per editor. You don't have a team. It's just you two working together. So, it'll work out that way.
Yeah. And also, and I guess as someone new to the chair, when I was, I made sure, knowing that was how I felt as an assistant. If I had ever stopped working for Kevin and went to work for another editor, I don't know why I would do that. But if I had, I would have gone in there with the concept of like, look, I'm looking to edit. I'm looking to move up. I want opportunities to edit. And that would have been made very clear during that interview process. So when it was time for me now to look for an assistant, of the handful of maybe 9 or 10 folks I talked to, I was very clear about that, especially if they were a more experienced assistant, of like, look, this resume is great, but like, I'm probably not going to give you scenes to cut on this first season. This is my first 2 solo credits. I'm probably going to be a little bit more guarded with it. But however, like the plan is, if we continue to work together, I would absolutely open that up, which is what should hopefully happen with Whitfield, who I ended up hiring as my assistant. I fully intend to give him some scenes to cut next time we work together, hopefully before season 3, but potentially not until season 3. We'll see how that goes. But so I think just that honesty and being a little bit upfront with it from everyone's point of view, if that's what you're looking to do, you have to speak up, and you make sure your expectations are known, so that you're not just floundering and frustrated.
Yeah. And when I got my first editing gigs in television, I was nervous myself. And so I didn't just tell my assistants, hey, you want to cut? Because I was trying to make the good impression just to, have job security for myself. So I can understand being afraid. But every once in a while, and also back then on TV shows, it was generally 3 editors and 2 assistants. So the assistants weren't considered like your team because they would switch back and forth on even and odd episodes. So they might have been an assistant that you hired to come with you, but then, she had to go do the other editor's episode 5 or something. So there was kind of a distance there because you were working with a whole group instead of just the 2 of you in solidarity. What's interesting is, and for assistants that are looking for the next gig or whatever, and right now I know it's kind of sparse out there for finding work, but just to tell you how strange it is for myself, I've just been lucky that because my experience has been widened by so many shows that I've worked on, I've met a lot of people like Danny. I knew him down the hall on X-Files, but he came to me and said, and I was like, hey, you're great. Let's do it. I didn't have to go do a massive search for assistants. When Danny officially got the bump up for season 2, it was this past summer when we found out, and we were on another show and he was my assistant. And I was like, that's great, Danny, but damn, now I've got to find an assistant to work with me. And this is going to be hard. And I was ready to go. And I had a whole list of people that I knew that I'd worked with in the past that maybe I could go and see if they wanted to assist me. But I know a lot of them were trying to be, bumped up themselves, and they were a little hesitant to be an assistant. But it just so happens the way it worked for the show, the season 2 of Yellowjackets, I was playing softball on a Sunday, and I saw a friend of mine that I had worked with in the past, who is an editor now, and he was on the other team. And I ran over between innings and go, hey, I'm looking for an assistant for Yellowjackets season 2. So if you know of anybody, would you please send them my way? And he's like, I'm not doing anything. I'll assist you. I was like, wait, what? And literally, we talked in the parking lot afterwards, and then he assisted me for the fall. And I wanted to get him a co-editing credit, which is what I've always aspired for Danny on all our shows. But Yellowjackets is under the independent agreement, which makes it really difficult to get a co-editing credit unless you staff new assistants. So that's why Danny doesn't have a co-editing credit on season 1 of Yellowjackets. We couldn't bump him up. And so the person who assisted me, he couldn't get a co-editing credit, but I did the same thing for him, saying, hey, he's actually an editor. Can you, here's his scenes that he cut. And he cut some really great scenes, but we got him additional editing on one of the episodes, which helps. So, you just got to try to.
Kevin's very fast when it comes to doing notes in the room, and he uses the trim tool very deftly. And I had never used really the trim tool at all. And coming from, I learned on Final Cut in college, and I had learned Avid as an assistant. So I hadn't really done a lot of cutting. But I would watch him kind of just interweave these layers with the trim tool. So it was so quick. So I had him show me how you would do it, and he kind of explained how it worked and all that. And I think for probably a couple of months, I forced myself every time I was cutting a scene or doing any kind of work like that to use it. And it always felt clunky. I was way slower for doing it, but I forced myself to use it just because I knew how fast I would be on the back end. And now I use it all the time. And I thought of that as an example of, there are some mechanical things as well, as I was in the room with Kevin, where it wasn't more, where it was almost, much more technical of just how to use the Avid. Small things, there's a million ways to do everything in Avid. But there are small things like that as well that I was able to pick up over time and just really recognize that this is a useful tool. And even though I could do it a different way, make sure I learn that way as well.
Yeah. And we always love when we find out from another team, especially when we're in person, we go, wait, we'd be looking at them while they edited and go, how did you just do that? And they show us the keystrokes. We're like, oh, we didn't know the Avid did that. And so we added it to our toolbox.
I'm pretty sure just about every season of television I've worked on, I've learned a new shortcut. especially when we're in the office. But I think even remote, I've learned a new shortcut on just about every show. There's always something new.
I think Wendy has some questions for us.
Yeah, let's do it.
I do. Okay, so there's some really good ones here. I want to start with, I think, Danny, this is more for you. What specific skills did you have as an assistant editor that helped you transition to becoming an editor? So are there specific skills that you can think of?
I mean, offhand, I think I was relatively quick in doing more of the assistant duties, which allowed me to make time to do more of the editing of the things. So I would get through my dailies as fast as I could. When Kevin would give me sound design to do, the assistants do a majority of the sound design, at least the first few layers. I would try to get all that done quickly. So that when there was a scene to be cut, or if I did have a scene to cut, I would then have time to do it. Like get everything that Kevin needed from me off my plate. So then I could focus on what I really wanted to be doing, which was cutting a scene. So I would just hurry up and, being fast at that and being kind of decisive and not procrastinating too much in order to make sure that Kevin didn't need me and I didn't have to worry about him bugging me while I could then dive into more of it. Yeah.
Or going, Danny, where's my scenes? I need my scenes.
Yeah, yeah, that never happened. By the way. One time. All right, we'll talk about it later.
Awesome.
And also Danny's very good at the technical aspect. He knows the workarounds, and that's because of his unscripted background or reality background.
Yeah,
because he problem solve a lot with their equipment.
Hands down, anybody who's in unscripted, I personally think it is a much harder job than scripted or scripted assisting. It's such a technical job. I personally believe that it's not even the same job. It's really, you're more Avid IT. You don't get to work with your editors as often. You're so often just doing technical work and responding to your post supervisor and coordinators. And so little of your work is anywhere near the creative end in reality. But that does give you such a great foundation of how to deal with the craziness of Avid when you're getting all kinds of different footage, and you end up becoming really good at it. So, and I know I'm not the only person who does look at a reality background and be like, oh, good, they'll know how to deal with problems. And as a quick note, with your AI poll question, back in 2016, we were already using a very rudimentary form of AI with multi-grouping. And if it wasn't for Super Grouper, which I'm sure some of you are aware of, we probably would have needed 4 to 5 more assistants on one of my last reality shows because there was so much footage to group, and this system helped automate some of it. And we would have needed a much bigger team to stay on the same schedule without it. So it's definitely still there.
As a strong union guy myself, I would say we should have gotten 4 or 5 more assistants in the show.
And it was a union show, so.
Yeah, so that's a bummer. By the way, I just happened to see your questions. I saw someone ask about One Piece. Danny and I were on One Piece.
Yeah.
We were on it from January up until September, right when Yellowjackets started. We finished our 2 episodes, but they're still finishing it now. But we had to go back to Yellowjackets. We'd always thought we were going back to Yellowjackets at a certain time, and we had to go. And the visual effects weren't done. So they're still cutting the visual effects of One Piece. And it's still coming out this season. So.
Should come out by the end of the year, I believe, was the plan, but I haven't heard an update in a while. And I did get a co-editing and an assistant or additional editing on that as well.
Yeah. You sure did.
Awesome. So here's a question a little bit about the content of the show. I think this is a good question. This is from Oscar Gratero. By the way, huge fan of Avid ScriptSync. Thank you for such great insight. The show goes back and forth in time on every episode. Does each editor tackle a particular moment in time, past, present, and then put it together, or is each editor in charge of an episode? I think that's what that.
Each editor has their own episodes. Yeah. Like I had 1, 5, and 8. Danny has 4 and 7, right? Yeah. And they shoot that in the 13 days. This isn't a block shooting show where they do 2 episodes at the same time. And 2 editors are cutting 2 separate episodes. So it is each editor in charge, but it's also the two storylines, you just have to cut whatever dailies come from the day before. So you might get two scenes from the 1996 timeline and one from the present day timeline. You can't worry about, like, I've got to cut all of the 96 flashback scenes at once, because they don't shoot it that way. They shoot it all over. And so, and then in some cases, we would have a couple of scenes that I had to wait for my first episode. I had to wait 3 months for them to shoot the snow scenes when they're climbing the mountains, because they went up to I forget what it is in Calgary to shoot out in the distance, because they shot it in Vancouver. So they took the actors, flew there and shot scenes for like the first 4 episodes when they were outside in the exteriors. So, it's like anything. You cut what you get, and you just have to know the script and what the intentions are and where the tone is and what the motivation of the characters are. And you just cut the scenes as you're, expected to, basically.
And I think that's why you really needed to be the one editor to weave those storylines together, because, if you had separate people cutting them, you might not be able to have that kind of fluidity.
Yeah. And you get to watch, like in episode 1 of season 2, it was a huge script, and it originally was 70 minutes long, and we trimmed it down. And with the director, we trimmed it down to like 65. And she was sure can't really get it any shorter than this right now, because that's how you feel as you make adjustments. And then when it came out, it was 59 minutes. So you find the way, and we adjusted a lot of scenes. Sometimes we changed when we went to flashbacks. And when you originally cut a scene in your dailies, you may end on a great look of one character, but then when you put it with the next scene and you say, oh, I want to do a match cut from the teen girl to the adult girl, you change your cutting patterns so you can make that. They like to do that a lot. You notice in the show, you'll go from teen Shauna to adult Shauna, in a similar shot, if you can, if it's been planned out properly. Yeah. Those things are nice little match cuts.
And there's also, in one of the episodes in season 2, one of my episodes, one of our adult scenes didn't get shot until way later. Like after my 13 days, I think it was scheduled for probably like a month into the edit. And the teen side of the wilderness side of it, was arguably cuttable. And it was part of the conversation as we were cutting time and getting things tighter, was like, do we need this scene? And knowing in the script, it's like, I think we really need to see it with the adult version, because the scene's not really working, but it should work a lot better once we get that second piece. And sure enough, it did. The scene didn't get cut. So there's also a little bit of like having to trust the script a little bit. It reads well. Let's wait until we get it all and look at it and make adjustments after that.
Okay, good stuff. I'm going to try to get as many of these in as we can. Brad Miller, this is an interesting question. This is Yellowjackets specific. I'm an assistant editor rewatching season 1 in preparation for binging season 2. And I got to know about the amazing soundtrack, how that came to be, how much of that was you guys versus the script. So do you want to give us a little insight into that? And choosing songs and stuff like that.
Sure. In season 2, we have a different music supervisor. Our season 1 music supervisor wasn't available for season 2. And I was able to recommend Nora Felder, who I'd worked with on Stranger Things and a couple of other shows. I can't remember what they are.
And she actually just won the Emmy for Stranger Things last year.
Yeah. And so I love Nora, and Nora always comes with creative ideas of what to do. And she'll send a bin with like 5 choices. As soon as you start shooting, getting dailies for your scene, she's sending you a bin with 5 choices saying, these might be good in scene 7, because she's read the script. And we try them. Like the Tori Amos song at the end of episode 1, Nora had it in the bin, and that was the first thing I tried. And I was like, oh, I love this. This is great. I'm going to cut to this. And so I talked to Nora, and we both decided, the other choices she sent were okay, but we really want to go with this. And then when I showed it to the producers, they were like, oh my God, I love it. We got to keep it. I love Tori Amos. This is perfect. And it really went with the scene. Some of the glory of using that song has been dissipated, because I guess the show Beef used the same song at the end of one of their episodes this week. And I was like, oh my God, how did that happen? And they do the cut of the music at the exact same spot to black. So very disappointed in that. But, that's just how it is. But some of the songs are scripted. They are mentioned in the script. The playback if you saw Jeff having his freak out to Papa Roach, that was in the script. He actually freaked out to that. And so we knew we were getting that cleared. The other things like, I can't tell you. There's in other episodes as little jokes and fun things. Like in season 1, in one of my episodes, Misty turns on her car radio and it's what was it, an ABBA song I used or something? I put in a song.
It was episode 2.
Episode 2. I put in a song because I thought it was funny and they cleared it and everybody loved it. So sometimes it's that little moments we find it ourselves. But we do hunt through a lot of cues to see what really goes with the scenes. And
it comes from everywhere. There was also a scene in that same episode in season 1, episode 2, where the song choice came from somebody on set had mentioned it to the director. And said like, oh, this song would be great. You should try this one. And I think it was one of the writers. It was for the montage when they do the
the writer came up because we had tried 3 different songs and we weren't happy with them.
And so the song ideas do come from a bit of everywhere, but the music supervisors are clutch.
Nice. Good information. Good to know. Here's Kazu Takeda. Hi, Daniel. What things did you find challenging to deal at first as a professional editor? Example, continuity versus best takes, dialogue overlap. So I think they're looking for kind of your thoughts about.
It's a bit of a hard question to answer, if I'm being honest. And I kind of, again, working with Kevin for the years and the way that I was introduced to taking over the Avid and cutting scenes and doing notes with him, honestly, by the time I got to Yellowjackets season 2 and had my own episodes, there wasn't a whole lot that was difficult. I was used to the process already. I guess that's not entirely true. The hardest part, honestly, was delegating work to my assistant and trying to convey with my assistant Whitfield on exactly like what I was looking for and getting used to his time expectations on how long things would take, and not, and just being patient. And as we got learning closer, because 4.5 years of Kevin, where him and I were like a well-oiled machine, I feel like by the end, I forget how we were on the first few episodes when, we were still figuring it out, where things were a lot more bumpy. So it was getting back to that bumpy and having to adjust to that from the other side, more so than the actual editing, which I feel like Kevin, had prepared me for over the years, and that felt okay.
Nice. And Kevin, I have 2 quick ones for you. Can you explain what a cutting pattern is? Did you mention that?
Well, when we say cutting pattern, we're talking about your choices going from shot to shot. Basically, that's a cutting pattern. Like, will you go close up, medium? When do you go to the close up? When do you pop wide? It's your basically saying cutting pattern to me is, your choice in where you edit, where you make the cuts. And also I saw something about Walter Murch in the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
What I'm talking about is don't cut when the eyes are closed. That is what drives me crazy. So it's not blinks. You can have blinks, but just don't make the edit on the blink because it's distracting. Believe me.
Or do it and show it to Kevin and laugh.
Yeah, you can do it on purpose like Danny.
So we have somebody who is who has limited experience in the industry, currently has an internship at a nonprofit as an editor. Do you have any advice for making connections, getting a foot in the door for post-production work? Trying to see. Am I on the right path by taking these first steps by contacting people from my favorite show? How can I follow up with them to get going with my career?
That is the biggest question, I think, is how to build your network in post. I definitely did that when I was a reality assistant. The last few years of being a reality assistant, I did cold email. I basically went onto the union's website, found editors' emails for shows that I thought were cool, and I would just shoot them emails asking them what I should do because I wasn't sure myself. So I did that a little bit, and I didn't never really stay in touch, but again, scripted work kind of fell into my lap there. So that's definitely not a bad thing. I think probably groups like this are likely helpful. I feel like there are mixer groups all over town that where people can go and just like, get a face to the name. And once you have a face to the name, I don't know how other people do it, but I have like a whole folder in my email where it's just like, oh, if I need an assistant or if I know someone who needs a post PA, I just like look in that, and then there's a whole list of people and I can just shoot them over to whoever's looking to hire.
Yeah. And unfortunately, just it's really dry out there right now.
Yeah.
And I mean, I have people contacting me. I mean, there's just nothing going on for the most part. So once this writer's strike, impending writer's strike, works itself out one way or the other, I'm sure there'll be a lot of content ready to be edited after that.
And I guess a little bit related, I forgot to bring this up when you were talking about how you hired Tucker for season 2. I found Whitfield, my assistant, through our post associate producer, Neil. And Neil had worked with him before, and it was really just like Neil liked his work ethic. He hadn't actually talked to the editor who had worked with Whitfield as an assistant. And, so when I was looking for somebody and I asked Neil if he knew anybody, he sent Whitfield's resume was one of the ones he sent me, and he only had good things to say about him. And so I think that's, as much as the technical skills can be useful and are important, making sure you make good impressions to people in the room who will like, to the point where they're like, oh no, this guy's great. At the end of the day, you can get better at scripting, but being easy to work with is pretty important.
That's one of the main things. I think you're going to be working a lot with this person. You want to get along with them, and it's not a marriage per se, but it is a close relationship.
Wait, and Kevin, I'm still waiting on my ring. It's not.
So
I shouldn't have bought that.
Yeah, but I think I've had experience with some assistants prior that even if they weren't my specific assistant, like they were someone else's, I would go, I really don't want to work with them because of the attitude you would get in the cutting rooms. It just was like it was a bother or complaining. You have to come with a positive attitude and network as much as possible. But don't try to write, I would say, don't write me and say, you want to be my assistant on Yellowjackets, because I have one. If you're going to write, say, I'm an assistant, here's my resume, will you please keep me in mind? Or if you hear of anything, so that if the door opens and there becomes a slot, then maybe there's a possibility. But if you come in, like Danny didn't just say, hey, get rid of your assistant, make me yours. I was looking for an assistant at the time. So
that's a good
I would
point
say
too.
Don't be too pushy. Be bold, but don't be pushy about it. If that makes sense.
I think the other direction to take that is also, hey, I'm looking for work. I'm interested, but hey, can we go grab a coffee or get lunch or something, when you're available? I actually just 2 weeks ago had lunch with an assistant who, had been waiting to have lunch with me for like 3 months. I was busy with Yellowjackets and some other things came up and we just kept pushing it. But he was fairly persistent in wanting to make that happen. And he did. And so we sat down and talked for an hour and a half, 2 hours, just face to face. And now, again, if a job comes up, I have a face to the name. He's definitely closer to the top of the pile than, just an anonymous email.
Yeah. And I have assistants that I would love to work with, if I had the need, but everything's going smooth. So, yeah.
Like you guys, good stuff. Really good insights. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. As you can tell, we have a lot of people here that just, there's many more questions than what we have time for. So you guys did an excellent job explaining how you guys work together and both of, the experience for moving up and also what working on that show is like. So we can't thank you enough. We really appreciate it. Thank you, Daniel and Kevin, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And be sure to catch up on past meetings by visiting our YouTube channel. We had in January, Jem Schofield of the C47, and we talked about lighting and shooting interviews. It was great. It was like a workshop, and he really showed some cool techniques that you probably wouldn't want to miss. So check that out. When you're on our YouTube channel, make sure to subscribe and then click the icon that looks like a bell, and you'll be notified when new videos drop. And be sure to connect with us. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. Use the hashtag LAPPG, and we'll see you virtually as well. And a big thank you to our partners, our platinum partner, AJA, our gold partners, Adobe, Blackmagic Design, OWC, Zeiss, Frame.io, and our silver partners, Isotope, SGO, and Media Silo by Shift Media. And we have supporting media and community partners who help make this happen every month so that we can bring you cool, interesting new technologies and interesting workflows, and we can connect as a community. I wish we had more time, but hopefully we can do something on your next show.
Thanks for having us.
Sounds like a plan.